The relationship between humans and technology has been a bit complicated lately. Okay, it's always been complicated, but lately we seem to be losing on some really important fronts, and I think at least one of the reasons for that comes down to this fundamental misconception about human nature and our relationship with technology. And once I explain what that is, I think you'll start to see technology differently in your life. At least I hope you will. To start out, I want to ask you a question. Is technology neutral? Now, if you're like most people, you probably think the answer to this relatively boring and mundane question is, of course, yes. Technology is neutral. Its only moral value comes from how we as human beings who are free agents choose to use it, whether we choose to use it for good or for bad, to do good things or to do bad things. And there are 1,000 examples that immediately leap to mind in defense of this conclusion. You can think about the internet, which can be used to scam vulnerable people out of money or to raise money for charities that help give to vulnerable people who need money. A sharp blade can be used to stab someone in an alleyway or to save their life in an operating room. So you can take this logic and apply it to pretty much every technology out there, and you get the same result, that you have this piece of technology and it's neutral. It just depends on whether we use it for something good or for something evil. The only problem with this approach is that it's actually predicated on a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature and our relationship to technology. To begin to see this, we need to take a look at what technology is. How would you define technology? There are a lot of different definitions out there, and with anything that we try to define, it actually gets really tricky when you get to the edge cases. But I think a good working definition, one that I often use, is that technology is anything humans devise that extends their natural powers to achieve some end. Anything humans devise that extends their natural powers so that they can achieve some given end. Now notice, embedded in that definition is this connection between technology and power. Technology is something that increases our powers. Therefore, it gives us power. It empowers us. I think that's a fairly non-controversial claim, that technology is something that gives us power. But remember what Lord Acton famously said about power, which is that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The fundamental insight in Lord Acton's idea is that power has an effect on us just by possessing it, regardless of how we use it. It isn't that he's not saying that when you use power for bad things, it corrupts you. He's saying the possession of power tends to corrupt you just by possessing it. No matter if your intention or even in your actuality, no matter whether you're trying to use it for good or for evil, possessing it is enough for many people, for most perhaps, to become corrupted by it. This is one of the major themes running through Tolkien's trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. And in that trilogy, if you've never read it, hopefully you've at least seen the movies, there's this ring that is called the Ring of Power. And so Frodo has the ring on, and at one point there's another guy, Boromir, who wants to get the ring from Frodo to use it for good ends. He realizes, well, this is very powerful, and if I can get it, I want to use it for good. The problem, the thing that he fails to understand, is that by possessing the ring, it will corrupt him. And the good thing that he set out to do will become a bad thing because he will become corrupt in the process. And so you have this ring of power. Its greatest danger is that it corrupts the beholder. It corrupts the one possessing it. And what we've somehow failed to understand is that the same thing is true of technology, because technology is just a form or a source of power. So as soon as we understand this about technology and power and the way that power can tend to corrupt us, we can see that it's the case that, at least for certain technologies, it's not just a matter of how we use them. Because using the technology at all has a way of shaping us, a way of conditioning or molding us. Because as human beings, our character, our beliefs, our dispositions, our desires, none of these things are fixed and immovable. They're not immutable. We can change these things, or these things can be changed by other things. And what using at least certain technologies tends to do is manipulate these things, sometimes in ways that we're completely unaware of. And so the things about us that are as central to us as anything, our character, our beliefs, our desires and dispositions, these are vulnerable and accessible to technology. And so the biggest issue with viewing technology as neutral is that it encourages us to make the mistake of thinking that as long as we don't use it for something evil, we won't be harmed. We tend to think of technology as a lake, as this still lake that we can put our boat in and decide where we want to use that lake to go in our boat. In reality, technology is much more like a river. It has a current, and as soon as we step into the river, we are pulled and drawn by that current. It doesn't matter if we're getting in the current to do something good or to do something bad. Standing in the river is enough to begin to feel that current, to be moved, to be relocated in a sense by that current. And just in case all of this seems too theoretical or abstract, I want to be sure to give a couple of concrete examples. One of my favorite concrete examples is that of parents who give smartphones to their children. I'll often hear them say things like, yes, we gave this phone to our child, but it's got controls on it that keep them from accessing harmful content. So they can't get to explicit content that would harm them. They can't use it to do something bad. Here's the problem. What if the biggest danger isn't what they'll use the phone to do, but what using the phone will do to them? And this seems to be roughly what the social science is showing us, that merely using the phone and some of the things that are on it, even for relatively benign activities, that using it is having the negative impact because using it is doing something to us. They fall into the trap of thinking that the only thing that matters is the content or the message. But in the words of the philosopher Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. We could also draw several examples out of AI use today and the use of chatbots, but I'll just take one for today. So we think about using AI, and you might think of there are people who are using it to do good things, and there are people who are using it to do bad or malicious things. And as long as you're not doing the malicious things, you're okay. What this misses is asking the question, what is using the tool doing to you? And one of the things that we definitely see that it's doing to people is that it's essentially flattening them out in their discourse, that people are beginning to literally talk like chatbots, that the variety of the way that people speak and their vocabulary and the way that they are phrasing sentences is being molded into the image of chatbots. And I don't know anybody that thinks this is a good idea or like on the whole that this is a good thing. Now, obviously, anytime we use technology, there is a trade-off. And perhaps I should have said this up front. I am not a techno-pessimist. I'm not somebody who thinks you shouldn't use any of these technologies. I'm using quite a few of them right now to record this video, then to edit it and to publish it. So I'm not anti-technology. It can be used for good things, and it can be used wisely in ways in which we avoid the negative, or manage at least, the negative impacts that come from actually using it. What I'm especially critical of and what I'm trying to draw attention to right now is that what we can't do is use these tools without pausing to think about how the very use of them is shaping and impacting us. Now, you may be thinking, perhaps technology, or at least some technology, really is like a river, and there is a current, and when we're in it, it is drawing or moving us. But who's to say that the direction it's moving us in isn't a good one? After all, technology generally is created to improve or to help mankind. I think that is often the case, at least. So why would we think that it's moving us in a bad direction? To answer that question, we can look at modern social media, the smartphones like an iPhone, and even artificial intelligence, and see how these different technologies are being designed and what current is in them and why the current is there. Now, what we know from the social sciences is that these technologies are hacking our attention and our attachment mechanisms. Why would they be doing that? Well, the reason is actually pretty straightforward and obvious. It's because that's the only way these platforms can continue to exist in a competitive marketplace. The thing that is driving the design decisions for these different platforms and technologies is what will generate the most revenue, because only the company who can generate the most revenue is going to stay around in a competitive marketplace. And so tech companies have spent ridiculous amounts of money making their products as addictive as possible, not because they thought, well, that would be good for you to be addicted, not because they thought, well, this is the best way to shape and form people, but because they realize that this is the only way we're going to stay in business, is if we outcompete the next guy who's doing the same thing. And so there's this sort of race to the bottom that takes place in it, and it builds a current that is, on the whole, not good for us. And I think this is what we have to be aware of. And if we are aware of it, I think we can reasonably swim against that current. I don't think we have to get out of the river. I don't think we can get out of the river because technology is sort of all pervasive. I think it's, for most people, it's pretty impractical to think that we're going to completely withdraw from it. But what we can definitely do is reflect on and think about what that current is and what direction it's taking us. How is it impacting my attention? How is it impacting my desire? How am I becoming overly attached to this particular technology or platform? And if we start thinking about technology that way, I have some hope that we can figure out a good way to use it.